Hello, everybody. So we are starting Act 3, Scene 1. What just happened in the previous scene, we saw that Romeo and Juliet were married by the friar. And so now I want you to think of Act 3, Scene 1 as kind of a turning point in the play. So how does this scene, how does it change from the mood that was set in the previous scene? Well, we have to look at the plot first, because a lot of stuff happens in this scene. So the first thing that we have to note is where we are. So we are in a public place, another Verona street, and if we recall, the last time that we were in a very public street in Verona was the first scene where we had the brawl between the Montagues and the Capulets. So that kind of foreshadows whenever we are in a very public place in Verona, some conflict could arise. So we have Benvolio and Mercutio in the middle of the street. And Benvolio, being the apprehensive character that he is concerned that they will not escape a brawl. Okay, they will run into perhaps a Capulet that will want to fight them. And then, of course, we have Tybalt entering. And we know that Tybalt is a very aggressive and person of violent nature, and he's very upset because he saw Romeo go to the Capulet feast, and he was insulted by this. So we kind of know that Tybalt is looking for a fight here. And it happens that Tybalt and Mercutio are two of the most headstrong and passionate members of each side of the feud. And when they meet, conflict will likely arise. So Benvolio, being the peaceful peacemaker character that he is, tries to avoid confrontation between both sides, but Mercutio is deliberately provocative. Okay, he's looking for a fight. Then we have Romeo appearing into the scene, and Tybalt insults him, hoping that he will respond to the challenge to fight him. However, this is not what Romeo does. He refuses to fight because he is now related to Tybalt through his marriage to Juliet. So imagine this. Tybalt says, Romeo, you will fight me, you insulted my family. And Romeo responds and says, no, you're my brother now. Okay, I don't want to fight you. I love you more than you know. And Tybalt is extremely confused by this, and this irritates him. Okay, this builds anger in him, and he wants to fight him even more. So, then we have Mercutio in this. He is disgusted by Romeo's reluctance to fight. Okay, he's upset that Romeo won't fight. So he wants to fight Tybalt. And to stop the battle, Romeo steps between them, and Tybalt stabs Mercutio under Romeo's arm. So, Mercutio's wound is extremely fatal, and he dies while cursing out a plague on both of your houses, meaning that he is cursing out both the Capulets and the Montagues, okay? Because that is what caused his death, okay? The feud between them. Now, blinded by rage over Mercutio's death, Romeo attacks Tybalt and actually kills him. Now, the problem with this, well, there's a lot of issues with Romeo killing Tybalt. The first being his most immediate danger is that a lot of people witness Romeo killing Tybalt as he is in a public place. The second issue with Romeo killing Tybalt is that Tybalt is related to Juliet, who is now his wife. So the repercussions of this will be extreme, and we see that with the end of this scene. So, the prince, the heads of the two households, being Lord Capulet and Lord Montague, and their wives appear at the scene. Now, after Benvolio gives an account of what has happened, the prince banishes Romeo from Verona and says that if he returns, okay, his penalty will be death. And he orders both Montague and Capulet to pay a heavy fine. Now, the only reason that Romeo was banished and not killed right then and there is because Tybalt actually began it by killing Mercutio, and Romeo responded. Now, the issue is the repercussions this will have for Romeo and Juliet is that Romeo is banished from Verona and cannot be with Juliet. Now, there's a lot to unpack in this scene that goes beyond um, analyzing the specific plot in terms of the events that happened. So let's look at some of the literary conventions and devices throughout this scene. Now, the first is the setting and mood. So, again, we are in a very public place, and remember the last time that we were in a very public street was the first scene of the play with the brawl. Okay, so that's repeating. Also, we have this scene acting as a very violent contrast to the romantic scene in Act 2. Okay, remember the previous scene was Romeo and Juliet getting married, and now we have death and violence throughout the Montague and Capulet families. So we have this very sharp contrast between scenes from the previous night, which is very interesting because we see the juxtaposition between the romance between Romeo and Juliet and that pure love on the backdrop to this hatred between the two families. Now, something that I always kind of ask myself when reading this scene is, why does Romeo really refuse to fight Tybalt? So we know that Tybalt attempts to initiate a fight, and Romeo responds by, "I love thee better than thou canst devise." Meaning, when I was talking about earlier how I was joking about how Romeo says, "You're my brother now. Okay, I don't want to fight you. I want to hug you." Because he feels that he has shed his identity as a Montague and he has become one with Juliet in marriage. Okay? So this is very interesting because he assumes that Tybalt will accept this, but he sees Romeo as still standing on the wrong side of the divide between the Montagues and Capulets. He can't shed this identity even though he feels that he can, which makes us think about when Romeo and Juliet were saying on the balcony scene, what's in a name? Well, there's a lot in a name, and I'm not sure that he can change his identity even though he wants to. Now, what's very interesting and even ironic in this situation is that Romeo and Juliet's love removes them and allows them to see that the feud between the Montagues and Capulets is curable. However, by being together, they actually drive and build up the conflict between the families even more. Like, I want you to think of it like this. So, if Romeo and Juliet would not have met, would Tybalt and Mercutio be dead? Probably not. So that begs the idea of fate throughout this scene. Now, again, when we're talking about the theme of fate, we're exploring the idea whether characters actually have the ability to choose their desired outcomes, okay, and make decisions on their own merit. When Tybalt dies, Romeo says, "Oh, I am fortune's fool," which means he is struck by a sense of anger, injustice, being unlucky, and cursed by bad fortune, things out of his control, which makes us think of what really caused this. And you could argue that the love between Romeo and Juliet has caused Romeo to do uncontrollable things. So how love can take you over. Now contrast this with Mercutio's response to his own fate, being his death. Now he blames the houses of Montague and Capulet for his death when he calls out, "Oh, curse you, curse both your houses." Now, he gives no blame to any higher power like Romeo, when Romeo says, "Oh, I'm fortune's fool," but instead he blames individuals, okay? He is specifically calling out the Montagues and Capulets, and more specifically Romeo for Mercutio's death, because of his unwillingness to fight. Now, the speed at which Mercutio and Tybalt's deaths occur, together with Romeo's marriage and then his banishment, all contribute to a sense of inevitability this was going to happen. That a chain of events, dramatic events and tragic events, have been set in motion in which the protagonists, Romeo and Juliet, have no control over what's going to happen. Okay? Now, going back to the idea of Mercutio saying, curse both your houses, it actually resonates as the voice of fate itself. Like something bad is going to happen to both the Montagues and Capulets moving forward. Now, let's finish this off just looking at conflict. Okay, wrap it all up in this scene. Now, the sudden extreme violence of this scene serves a reminder that for all the love, beauty, and romance in this play, it is on the backdrop, or against a backdrop, of revenge and the masculine notions, okay, to fight and to be aggressive and be prideful for who you are and what family that you represent. Now, it's kind of a battle of which one will win. Will the idea of revenge and pride win over against love and romance? So this asks the question of, do Romeo and Juliet really stand, it says a change, but a chance in this kind of world?